55 degrees Celsius. That is 131 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature recorded at one place on this planet, a place where the ground itself bleeds acid, where lava lakes glow through the night, and people still live there, across every continent. Their location so extreme, so hostile, so impossibly dangerous that maps label them with warnings instead of names. These are the places nobody wants to visit, and right now, Explore Danger is taking you to every single one. Big Bend National Park, USA. Temperatures here have topped 119 degrees Fahrenheit. In that heat, a 14-year-old boy collapsed and died on a day hike. Big Bend sits at the edge of the Chihuahuan Desert, covering over 800,000 acres of cracked, waterless land. This is the only place in America where an intact mountain range rises straight out of the desert, split by a river. The Rio Grande carves a sharp V-shaped bend northward here, cutting through Santa Elena Canyon, where limestone walls climb 1,500 feet straight up. The park receives fewer than 12 inches of rain per year. Rattlesnakes, black bears, and mountain lions patrol the trails. But the real killer is the sun. With the nearest hospital hours away and cell service non-existent across most of the park, a wrong turn on a summer afternoon means no one is coming to help. Big Bend holds some of the lowest light pollution levels in the entire United States. At night, the Milky Way stretches overhead in full detail, breathtaking from a distance, brutal up close. Corcovado National Park, Costa Rica. National Geographic once called this the most biologically intense place on Earth. That intensity cuts both ways. Corcovado sits on a remote OSA peninsula, accessible only by boat through mangrove channels or by tiny planes landing on jungle airstrips. Inside, jaguars hunt silently through undergrowth so thick you cannot see 3 feet ahead. Bull sharks patrol the rivers. Fer-de-lance vipers, among the deadliest snakes in the Western Hemisphere, lie coiled on the forest floor in near-perfect camouflage. In the 1970s, logging companies and gold miners nearly destroyed this place. Scientists raced to convince the government to protect it, and the national park was established in 1975. Losing Corcovado would have meant losing a living laboratory found nowhere else on Earth. Even today, the jungle fights back against every visitor. Trails flood without warning. River crossings shift overnight. This is not a park that invites you. It is a park that tolerates you. Bonito, Brazil. The rivers here are so transparent, they look empty until you put your face underwater. Then the world explodes. Located in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, Bonito is a top ecotourism destination built around crystal clear freshwater systems. The visibility in these rivers reaches depths that rival ocean reefs. Visitors float downstream in neoprene wetsuits, face down, watching schools of fish glide over limestone bed below. But this clarity comes with strict control. The number of visitors is capped daily. Every tour follows a set route. Every footstep is monitored. Bonito proved that extreme beauty survives only under extreme protection. The dry season brings the clearest water, ideal for snorkeling and scuba diving in freshwater caverns that stretch deep underground. If the heat of Central America and the rivers of South America just raise your pulse, you should know the next continent we are heading to as places where the ground itself can cut you open. Ilha de Queimada Grande, Brazil. The Brazilian Navy has forbidden civilians from setting foot here. The reason is slithering across every square meter of ground, known worldwide as Snake Island. This small rocky outcrop off Brazil's southern coast is home to between 2,000 and 4,000 golden lancehead pit vipers. Their venom is so potent it can dissolve human tissue around the bite within hours. Scientists estimate roughly one snake per square meter across the island's 430,000 square meters of terrain. The last permanent residents were lighthouse keepers. Local legend says the final keeper and his family were found dead after snakes entered through the windows. Today, only researchers with special government permits and military escorts are allowed to land. When a YouTuber illegally reached the island in 2023, he wore full body armor. One misstep on this island does not mean a hospital visit. It means a closed casket. That many venomous snakes per square meter on an island where no hospital exists, where rescue would take hours by boat. If that number 1 snake per square meter. Stopped you for even a second, a single tap on the like button is the only honest response. Because most people will never know this island exists. And now you do. Madagascar. People assume Madagascar is just Africa's large island neighbor. That assumption misses the truth by about 88 million years. After separating from the supercontinent Gondwana, Madagascar evolved in total isolation. Roughly 90% of its plants and animals exist nowhere else on the planet. The baobab trees lining the avenue of the baobabs look like they were ripped from the soil and planted upside down, branches reaching into the sky like roots. Locals in the Menabe region believe these trees house the spirits of their ancestors, guarding the dry land for eternity. But Madagascar's isolation also means fragility. Deforestation has already stripped over 90% of the original forest cover. What remains is disappearing at one of the fastest rates on Earth. This is a place where evolution built something unrepeatable, and humans are erasing it in real time. Singi de Bemaraha, Madagascar. The word Singi translates to the place where one cannot walk barefoot. That is not a figure of speech. In western Madagascar, a vast forest of razor-sharp limestone spikes rises in the earth like a stone cathedral built by something that hates human feet. These formations stretch across 375,000 acres, with some pinnacles reaching over 2,600 feet. The rock is so sharp it slices through boots, climbing ropes, and exposed skin without resistance. Millions of years of tropical rainfall carved the limestone into needles, creating a landscape that looks alien from above and lethal from below. Yet life thrives here. Lemurs leap between the blades with bare hands and feet, navigating routes that would hospitalize a human. Scientists must use harnesses, helmets, and heavy gloves just to study what the lemurs do naturally. Large sections of the Tsingy remain completely unexplored because no equipment exists that can safely traverse them. 2 places on the same island, one erasing itself through deforestation, the other so hostile that exploration equipment fails against it. If someone you know still thinks Madagascar is just a kid's movie, send them this video. Watch what happens to their face when they see a forest made of knives. Danakil Depression, Ethiopia. Welcome to the hottest inhabited place on Earth. Air temperatures here reach 55 degrees Celsius, that is 131 degrees Fahrenheit, in a landscape that sits 125 meters below sea level. 3 tectonic plates are ripping the ground apart beneath your feet. The result is a hellscape of sulfuric acid pools glowing neon yellow and green, active volcanoes venting toxic gas, and salt flats that stretch to the horizon in every direction. The Afar people have mined salt here by hand for centuries, carving blocks from the earth in temperatures that would kill an unprepared visitor in hours. In 2012, 5 European tourists were killed and 4 abducted near the Erta Ale volcano within the depression. Erta Ale itself holds one of only a handful of permanent lava lakes on Earth, a churning pit of molten rock that has burned continuously for over a century. NASA has studied this region as the closest analog to the surface of Mars. The Danakil Depression is not a place the planet forgot. It is a place the planet is still building, violently, relentlessly, and with zero tolerance for human presence. Skeleton Coast, Namibia. The Bushmen of Namibia called it the land god made in anger. Portuguese sailors had a shorter name, the Gates of Hell. Over 1,000 shipwrecks lie scattered along this 500-kilometer stretch of Namibian coastline. Dense fog rolls in from the cold Benguela Current, blinding ships before shallow sandbars tear them apart. Sailors who survived the wreck faced a worse fate on shore, an endless desert with no fresh water, no shelter, and no way out. The bleached bones of whales and seals mixed with rusted hulls half buried in sand. The wreck of the Edward Bolen, stranded in 1909, now sits 400 meters inland as the desert slowly swallowed the coastline around it. 11 species of sharks patrol the waters offshore. Desert-adapted lions stalk the beaches. Even today, this coast remains one of the most sparsely populated stretches of land on the planet. The Skeleton Coast does not need fences or warnings. Its reputation keeps people away. A place so hostile that God allegedly made it in anger. A coastline that swallows ships and starves survivors. If you have been watching since the beginning, and you are still here, you are the kind of person who looks at the world differently. You do not scroll past things that matter. Subscribing means you will be here when we cover the places that make even the skeleton coast look tame. And those videos are already in production. Lake Natron, Tanzania. The water here has a pH as high as 10.5 that is caustic enough to burn skin and dissolve the eyes of animals that fall in. Lake Natron sits in northern Tanzania at the base of the active Ol Doinyo Langai volcano. Volcanic ashes leach sodium carbonate into the water for millennia, turning it into a chemical bath that calcifies the bodies of dead animals. Photographer Nick Brandt documented birds and bats found along the shore. Their corpses preserved in mineral deposits, so perfectly they look like stone sculptures. The lake glows blood red from the alkaline-loving microorganisms that thrive in water no other life can tolerate. Yet 2.5 million lesser flamingos breed here every year. The same chemistry that kills everything else creates the perfect nursery for their eggs. Lake Natron is a contradiction frozen in red water, a graveyard and a nursery sharing the same poisonous shore. Chitwan National Park, Nepal. Nestled at the foot of the Himalayas, Chitwan is one of the last intact ecosystems of the Terai region. Established in 1973 as Nepal's first national park, it shelters Bengal tigers, one-horned rhinoceroses, and over 500 species of birds across the tropical lowlands that most people never associate with the Himalayas. A 75,000-hectare buffer zone surrounds the park, blending dense jungle with the villages that border it. Sloth bears wander within meters of farming communities. Gharial crocodiles patrol the Rapti River with jaws lined with over 100 needle-thin teeth. This is not a zoo behind glass. This is a place where the predators outnumber the park rangers, and the boundary between wilderness and village is a line drawn in mud, a lake that turns animals to stone, and a jungle where tigers share space with farming families. These are not places that appear on travel brochures. They are places that challenge everything you think you know about the planet. Drop a comment right now. Which African location so far shocked you the most? The Danakil Depression, the Skeleton Coast, or Lake Natron? There's no wrong answer. But silence feels wrong after what you just saw. Pamir Highway, Tajikistan. If a ranking existed for the world's most punishing roads, the Pamir Highway would sit at the top and laugh at whatever came second. This is the second highest international highway on Earth, threading to the Pamir Mountains at elevations above 4,000 meters. There are no guardrails. Long sections have no asphalt. On one side, the Panj River Gorge drops hundreds of meters. On the other side, the sheer cliffs of Afghanistan stare back. For centuries, camel caravans and explorers like Marco Polo used this corridor. Soviet-era tanks still rust along the roadside, relics of a war fought in terrain that breaks machines and men equally. Oxygen thins at this altitude. Engines lose power. Headaches and nausea set in without warning. Yet truckers drive this road daily, carrying supplies to communities that have no other connection to the outside world. Spinetti, Georgia. If one image could capture Spinetti, it would be the medieval Koshki stone towers, rising from a green valley floor like the fingers of a buried giant. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but the terrain has kept mass tourism at bay for centuries. Spinetti sits deep in the Caucasus Mountains, accessible only through winding passes that collapse under landslides every winter. For thousands of years, while the rest of Georgia was invaded and occupied, Spinetti remained unconquered. The towers were built as defense posts and grain storage during clan wars, some rising over 20 meters high from foundations laid in the 9th century. The road in is a test. Narrow, unpaved in sections, subject to rockfalls. That difficulty is the filter. Only committed travelers reach Spinetti, and those who do find a civilization that has resisted the modern world, not through choice, but through geography. The valleys still operate under traditions older than most countries. The fact that governments still allow people to drive the Pamir Highway, with no guardrails, no emergency services, and diminishing oxygen, raises a serious question. At what point does preserving a historic route become negligent? Some say the road is a cultural treasure. Others say it is an open-air death sentence dressed up as adventure tourism. Oymyakon, Russia, minus 71.2 degrees Celsius. That is minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the lowest temperature ever recorded in a permanently inhabited settlement on Earth. Log here on February 6, 1933. Oymyakon sits in northeastern Siberia, over 3,200 miles east of Moscow, in a region called the Pole of Cold. About 500 people live here year-round. Schools stay open until the thermometer hits minus 52 degrees Celsius. Cars must be left running overnight, or the engines freeze solid by morning. Freshly caught fish freeze within 30 seconds of leaving the water. Glasses freeze to faces. Batteries die in minutes. The ground is permafrost, which means the dead cannot be buried until the soil is thawed with bonfires burning for days. Yet life continues. People raise livestock, drive to work, send children to school. The temperature swing between winter and summer reaches over 100 degrees Celsius. That is the widest annual range of any inhabited place on Earth. The Arvaza gas crater, Turkmenistan. In 1971, Soviet engineers drilling for natural gas in the Karakum Desert punctured the roof of an underground cavern. The ground collapsed, opening a crater 70 meters wide and 30 meters deep. Toxic methane began pouring out. To prevent the gas from spreading to nearby villages, someone made the decision to light it on fire. They expected it to burn out in a few weeks. It has been burning ever since. Over 50 years of continuous fire in the middle of a desert. The locals call it the gates of hell. At night, the orange glow is visible from miles away, turning the flat desert into something out of a fever dream. In 2013, Canadian explorer George Karunis became the first and only person to descend into the crater. He wore a heat-resistant suit and a self-contained breathing apparatus. At the bottom, he collected soil samples that revealed bacteria thriving in conditions previously thought impossible for life. Turkmenistan's government has repeatedly announced plans to extinguish the flame. So far, the fire has outlasted every promise. Minus 96 degrees in Siberia, a fire that has burned for over 50 years in Turkmenistan. The extremes of Central Asia do not follow the rules the rest of the planet agreed to. If you're the kind of person who needs to understand why, not just what, then you already belong here. Subscribing is not a favor to anyone. It is a decision about what kind of content fills your feed. And next week, we are covering something that makes the gates of hell look like a campfire. Lake Bohinj, Slovenia. For 0.2 kilometers long, 1 kilometer wide, and cold enough to shock your lungs in July. Lake Bohinj is Slovenia's largest permanent lake, a glacial body of water blocked by a wall of ancient rubble. The water is so clear it functions as a mirror, reflecting the Julian Alps in perfect symmetry. Unlike its famous neighbor Lake Bled, Bohinj has no island church, no castle cliff, no Instagram crowd. The small towns surrounding the lake are accessible only by narrow roads that wind through forests where cell signals disappear. Kayakers, swimmers, and hikers share the shoreline with absolute silence. The waterfalls feeding the lake drop from limestone cliffs hidden deep in the surrounding forest. This is the Slovenia that existed before tourism discovered the country. Quiet, unreachable, unspoiled, and increasingly hard to keep that way. Albanian Alps. Faith. If the Swiss Alps are royalty, then the Albanian Alps are a battle-scarred hermit who never asked to be found. Legend says these peaks are cursed, and the bravest warriors of the Balkans hesitated to cross them. That reputation kept mass tourism away for decades. Faith sits in a valley surrounded by jagged limestone walls, accessible until recently only by a rough dirt trail. The isolation preserves something rare, a village that looks exactly as it did a century ago. Stone houses with slate roofs, a 19th century church standing in a meadow, a lock-in tower where men fleeing blood feuds hid for years under the cannon, Albania's ancient code of law. The road has improved, but the mountains have not softened. Rockfalls close the pass regularly. Winter buries the village entirely. The most significant cultural feature of Faith is not the landscape. It is the fact that the landscape refused to let the modern world in. Kotara Bay, Montenegro. Most people mistake this for a fjord. It is not. Kotara Bay is a ria, a submerged river valley carved long before the Adriatic flooded it. The limestone cliffs of the Origin and Loveson mountain ranges press inward from both sides, squeezing the deep blue water into a channel so narrow it feels like sailing through a hallway. The old town walls stretch 4.5 kilometers, climbing 260 meters up the mountainside to the fortress of Sveti Ivan, built between the 9th and 18th centuries. At night, The fortress lights reflect across the still water, creating a double image that looks painted, unlike Venice or Dubrovnik. Kotor has not been consumed by cruise ship crowds. The bay is too narrow, the approach too tight, the town too tucked away. Kotor is the kind of place that survives by being difficult to reach. And that difficulty is exactly what keeps it worth reaching. Procida, Italy. If neighboring Capri is a celebrity, Procida is the fisherman who never wanted the spotlight. This is the smallest island in the Bay of Naples and the least commercialized. Rows of tightly packed houses in pink, yellow, blue, and terracotta climb the hillside above the harbor like a painter's palette spilled down a cliff. In 2022, Procida was named Italy's capital of culture, the first island in Italian history to hold the title. Fishing boats still line the Marina Coricella, where nets dry on stone walls built centuries ago. There are no luxury resorts, no velvet ropes, no lines. Procida's beauty does not perform for visitors. It simply exists, calm and radiant, the way it has for hundreds of years. 3 countries along the Mediterranean, a glacial lake, a cursed mountain village, a submerged river valley, and a fishing island that accidentally became a cultural capital. If you had to live in one of these 4 places for the rest of your life, Bohinj, Staithe, Kotor, or Procida, which would you choose? There is no trick. Just a question you will think about longer than you expect. Drop your answer below. Palawan, Philippines. Often called the last frontier of the Philippines, Palawan earned that name the hard way. The Taban Caves hold evidence of human habitation stretching back over 50,000 years. Today, the island offers some of the most pristine marine ecosystems left in Southeast Asia. Hidden lagoons sit behind sheer rock walls accessible only by kayak through narrow gaps. The Puerto Princesa underground river runs 8.2 kilometers through a cave system so vast it contains its own ecosystem of bats, swiftlets, and monitor lizards. Mountain climbers and divers share the island with communities that still fish using traditional methods. Beyond the coastline, Palawan's interior remains dense jungle, much of it unmapped and largely unexplored. Yakushima, Japan. This subtropical island off the southern coast of Kyushu receives some of the heaviest rainfall in Japan, an average of 4,000 millimeters per year on the coast and up to 10,000 millimeters in the mountainous interior. That rain feeds a cedar forest so ancient it predates most human civilizations. The oldest trees, called yakusugi, are over 1,000 years old. The most famous, Jamansugi, may be over 7,000 years old. Moisture collects in hollows and canopy domes, creating microhabitats for mosses, ferns, and species found nowhere else. The forest floor is a living carpet of green. After decades of heavy logging nearly stripped the island, the government established national park protections. Today, Yakushima is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Most visitors come to hike through the mountainous interior, but the trails demand respect. Fog rolls in fast. Temperature drops are sudden. The forest that looks magical from photographs can become disorienting within minutes. Raja Ampat, Indonesia. More than 1,500 small islands. Over 75% of the world's known coral species. More than 1,500 fish species. Raja Ampat, at the northwestern tip of the Bird's Head Peninsula, is what scientists call the species factory, the epicenter of marine biodiversity on Earth. Reaching it requires multiple flights to Sarong, then hours by speedboat across open water. Everything, food, fuel, medicine, must be transported from the mainland. The resorts range from high-end eco-lodges to simple homestays, but nothing here is cheap. The isolation that protects the coral also punishes the visitor's wallet and patience. Diving here is not a vacation activity. It is a pilgrimage. Below the surface, manta rays glide through cleaning stations. Walking sharks crawl across the reef at night. Pygmy seahorses the size of a fingernail cling to fan corals. Raja Ampat does not advertise itself. It simply exists at the edge of human reach, holding more life per square meter of ocean than anywhere else on the planet. The heaviest rainfall in Japan, the highest coral density on Earth, the oldest cave dwellings in Southeast Asia. These 3 places hold records that most geography textbooks ignore. If that fact frustrates you, if you believe people should know about Raja Ampat's 1,500 coral species or Yakushima's 7,000-year-old trees, Then a single like pushes this information towards someone who needs it. The algorithm does not care about importance. It cares about numbers. Your tap is a vote. North Sentinel Island, India. No one is allowed here. Not tourists, not researchers, not governments. The Sentinelese people have occupied this 60-square-kilometer island in the Bay of Bengal for an estimated 60,000 years with zero sustained contact with the outside world. In 1896, an escaped convict washed ashore and was found dead, stabbed on the beach. In 1974, a National Geographic film crew arrived and was met with a barrage of arrows. One arrow struck the director in the thigh. In 2006, 2 fishermen whose boat drifted too close were killed. In 2018, American missionary John Allen Chow illegally landed on the island. He was killed on the beach. His body was never recovered. The Indian government enforces a strict exclusion zone. Approaching within 5 nautical miles is a criminal offense. The Sentinelese have made their position clear across every century and every attempt at contact. This island is not abandoned. It is defended by the only people on Earth who have refused the modern world entirely and backed that refusal with lethal force. Gungatei Valley, Bhutan. A vast U-shaped valley in central Bhutan, carved by glaciers and carpeted in dwarf bamboo. Gungatei is home to the Gangting Monastery, a 17th century Buddhist sanctuary perched on a hilltop overlooking the valley floor. Each winter, endangered black-necked cranes migrate from the Tibetan Plateau to this exact valley. Locals believe the cranes circle the monastery 3 times upon arrival and 3 times upon departure as a gesture of reverence. The valley spans parts of Phobjika and Gangting, its marshlands providing habitat for over 300 species of birds and plants. Bhutan measures national success by gross national happiness instead of GDP. Entry requires a daily fee that limits tourism to small, controlled numbers. Gungatei does not exist on most travel itineraries. It exists in a country that decided long ago that preservation matters more than profit. Bohinj, French Polynesia. This island does not compete with Bora Bora for resort traffic. It does not try. Bohinj actually consists of 2 small islands connected by a short bridge, creating sheltered coves with water, so clear the bottom looks touchable from the surface. The pace of life here is measured in tides, not minutes. When viewed from the right angle, the mountain range on Huahai Nui traces the silhouette of a woman lying on her back. Local legend says a goddess transformed herself into the rock to protect the island forever. No mega resorts, no nightclubs, no rush. Huahai is the Polynesia that existed before tourism arrived with concrete and itineraries. For the travelers who reach it, this island offers something increasingly rare in the Pacific: silence. Wahiba Sands and Wadis, Oman, a vast undulating sea of golden sand stretching across roughly 12,500 square kilometers. The dunes range from pale yellow to deep copper and shift up to 10 meters per year, making permanent construction impossible. Bedouin communities have lived among these sands for generations, navigating by stars and wind patterns. Nearby, Wadi Bani Khalid offer the opposite extreme. Cool turquoise pools fed by underground springs, surrounded by lush date palms growing from bare rock. The contrast between the dunes and the wadi is so sharp, it feels like crossing into a different continent. Camels still serve as transport deep in the sands. At sunset, the dunes glow amber and the silence is total. This is the Arabian Peninsula stripped of skyscrapers and oil wealth. Just sand, water, rock, and the people who learn to live between them. If you had to spend 1 week in total isolation, no phone, no internet, no contact with anyone, would you choose North Sentinel Island's jungle, Gungatei Valley's marshlands, Wahini's coves, or Oman's dunes? You cannot say none. Pick one. Own it. Drop it below. Faroe Islands. From a certain angle, a lake on the Faroe Islands appears to float hundreds of meters above the Atlantic Ocean. It is an optical illusion, but the isolation is real. Before 2004, the village of Gasadala was cut off from every other settlement on the island. Reaching it meant climbing mountains over 400 meters high on foot. When a tunnel was finally blasted through the rock, the village had fewer than 20 residents left. Today, it may have as few as 11. The Mühlfossa waterfall plunges directly off a cliff into the ocean in one of the most photographed scenes in the North Atlantic. But photographs miss the wind. They miss the horizontal rain. They miss the isolation that turned this archipelago into a place where humans survive not by conquering nature, but by quietly negotiating with it. The Faroe Islands are not for travelers seeking comfort. They are for people searching for the edge of the inhabited world. Lofoten Islands, Norway. Sharp mountain peaks next to white sand beaches that look like they belong in the tropics. That is not a travel brochure error. That is Lofoten. This chain of islands sits 200 kilometers inside the Arctic Circle, yet the Gulf Stream keeps winter temperatures roughly 20 degrees Celsius warmer than other places at the same latitude. The combination of ancient rock formations carved by ice ages and the warm Atlantic current creates landscapes that should not exist this far north. Human life here has survived over 1,000 years thanks to one species, Atlantic cod. Every winter, millions of cod migrate from the Barents Sea to Lofoten to spawn. The locals hang the fish on massive wooden racks called gel, letting the Arctic wind and sea air dry them naturally over months. This method has not changed since Viking times. Lofoten is proof that survival at the edge of the world requires not technology, but patience and adaptation measured in centuries. Azores, Portugal. 9 volcanic islands scattered across the North Atlantic, over 1,400 kilometers from the Portuguese mainland. The Azores sit on the mid-Atlantic ridge, where the Eurasian and North American tectonic plates pull apart. That geological instability means earthquakes and eruptions are not historical footnotes. They are ongoing realities. In 1522, the town of Villafranca do Campo, then the capital of São Miguel, was buried by a catastrophic earthquake. Many houses across the archipelago are built from black basalt blocks, the cooled remains of the lava that created the islands in the first place. Deep craters filled with emerald lakes define the interior landscape. Hydrangea hedgerows line roads that wind through dairy farms and thermal hot springs. The Azores are beautiful in the way that a loaded gun is beautiful. The same forces that sculpted these islands could reshape them overnight. Colonia del Sacramento, Uruguay. This is not just a town. It is a time capsule locked on the banks of the Rio de la Plata, directly across the water from Buenos Aires. While the Argentine capital buzzes with millions, Colonia sits quietly under crumbling stone arches with a population that refuses to hurry. Most colonial cities in South America carry the fingerprints of one empire. Colonia carries two. Spain and Portugal fought over the strategic spot for over a century, and the architecture shows it. Portuguese stone walls next to Spanish colonial facades, neither winning, both surviving. The cobblestone streets are rough and uneven, with drainage channels cut down the center. A 1680 lighthouse still guards the point. Vintage cars from the 1950s line the streets, not as decoration, but as daily transportation. Colonia does not try to be charming. It simply never changed. And in a world that demolishes the old for the new, that stubbornness is its greatest asset. Treviso, Italy. Venice is 30 minutes away by train. Millions of tourists flood Venice every year. Almost none of them come here. That is Treviso's secret weapon. Canals like the Buranelli wind through medieval buildings. But instead of gondolas charging 80 euros, you find locals on bicycles crossing stone bridges. The city walls date to the 16th century. The house facades carry frescoes painted directly onto the plaster centuries ago, fading but still visible. The river Sile flows through the center, carrying a history that predates the Roman Empire. Treviso invented tiramisu. It grows a radicchio that defines northern Italian cuisine. It does all of this without a single selfie stick blocking the view. The most authentic version of Italy is not hiding. It is sitting in plain sight, 30 minutes from the most visited city on earth, waiting for someone to notice. 50 years burning in a Turkmen desert. 60,000 years of isolation on an Indian Ocean island. 7,000 years growing in a Japanese forest. The places we cover today span every continent and every extreme this planet offers. Some are beautiful. Some are deadly. Most are both. Now it is your turn. Drop your top 3 from this entire video in the comments. The 3 that hit the hardest. The 3 you cannot stop thinking about. I will share mine after I read yours. If you made it to this sentence, you watch content differently than most people. You do not skim. You do not skip. You stay because the world is more complex and more dangerous and more extraordinary than the surface suggests. The people who subscribe to this channel already know that. The next video goes deeper into places that governments have tried to erase from public maps. You will not want to miss that one. I will see you there.